When I was 5 years old, I watched my father punch my mother so hard, she collapsed onto the kitchen floor and didn't get up for a full minute. That image never left me. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a nightmare. It was our Tuesday. We lived in a two-bedroom rental in Bakersfield, California. My dad was a mechanic who drank every night and prayed only on Sundays. My mother, Rosa, worked the late shift at a diner and wore long sleeves year-round, even in the summer. I used to sit in the hallway, holding my breath, counting the seconds between yelling and the sound of glass breaking. It became a ritual, like bedtime prayers, only backwards. People always ask me how I turned out successful, how I became a millionaire by 30. They think I must have had a mentor, some secret formula, a lucky break. But the truth is uglier. I made money out of spite. I built success out of trauma. Every dollar I earned felt like one less he could ever claim. My name is Adrian, and this is my story, not the filtered one I give reporters or podcast hosts, the real one. The one that started in a house where silence was safer than speaking, and pain was just part of the routine. I remember once, when I was 7, my mom gave me a $20 bill and told me to hide it. "Don't tell your father," she whispered. "This is for your future." That bill stayed hidden under my mattress for years. I never spent it. It was sacred. It was hope in paper form. I don't know when exactly I decided I would never be like him. Maybe it was the time he broke our TV and blamed me, or the time he made my mom cry on Christmas. But I knew, even as a kid, I'd either become him or run as far from him as I could, and I ran hard. This story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when survival turns into ambition, and ambition turns into freedom. So if you're reading this hoping for a neat, happy ending, turn away now, because this story is jagged, unfiltered, true, and it starts with a boy who swore he'd never be his father. By the time I turned 10, I had already mastered the art of invisibility. I knew how to tiptoe past sleeping monsters, how to fake a laugh in front of social workers, how to smile without showing too many teeth. At school, I was the quiet kid. Teachers called me respectful and reserved. What they didn't know was that I was just exhausted. Living in fear drains you in strange, quiet ways. My mother was always working. Double shifts, graveyard shifts, anything to stay out of the house. I'd make us both cereal for dinner and pretend it was fun. Just us bachelors, I'd joke. She'd laugh. But I could see the sadness behind her eyes. Sometimes, I'd hear her cry through the bathroom door. I never knocked, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to make her lie. She'd have to say, "I'm fine," and we both knew she wasn't. My father, Raoul, treated our home like a kingdom. He ruled with fists, curses, and beer bottles. On payday, he was loud. On every other day, he was dangerous. He once told me, "Real men don't cry, they conquer." I remember thinking, if this is conquering, I want nothing to do with it. One night, he came home late. Again, I was asleep on the couch, and I heard my mom whisper, "Please, not tonight." That's when I heard a slap, then silence. That silence was worse than any scream. I stayed frozen. Every cell in my body wanted to help her, but I was too small, too scared. I hated myself for that. The next day, she wore sunglasses to church, and I decided something. I would get us out. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I knew I couldn't keep watching the woman who gave me everything get torn down by the man who gave me nothing but his last name. That night, I pulled out the $20 bill again, and I made a vow. One day, I'd turn that 20 into enough to never need him again, even if it killed me, because freedom had a cost, and I was ready to pay. I started working under the table jobs when I was 11, cleaning yards, hauling junk, scraping gum off sidewalks. I didn't care what it was. I just wanted cash. Every dollar I earned went into an old shoebox under my bed. I never touched it. Not for candy, not for games. That money was my exit plan. Kids at school made fun of my shoes, said I smelled like gas station snacks and thrift stores. I didn't argue. I just kept my head down and worked. One afternoon, I helped an older woman load boxes into her van outside the library. She handed me $10 and a sandwich. "You work hard," she said. "You're going to be somebody." I nearly cried. That night, I told Mom. She looked at me like I was made of gold. She kissed my forehead and said, "One day, they'll know who you are." She was wrong, though. First, I had to disappear. I kept saving. I stopped talking in class. I stopped fighting back when the other boys shoved me. I wasn't afraid. I just didn't have time to waste on being angry. I read books about money, business, anything I could get from the library. I learned what stocks were, how banks worked, what credit meant. I started fixing broken electronics from yard sales, phones, radios, even old DVD players. I'd resell them online. It wasn't much, but it was something. At 13, I opened a secret checking account using my mom's ID. She never knew. By 14, I had a few hundred saved. By 15, I had 1,000. The day I turned 16, I applied for a business license. Nobody knew. I wasn't just saving to escape anymore. I was building something. It didn't have walls yet, but it had a name. And it started with a boy who knew exactly what he never wanted to become. Because sometimes the best blueprint for a better life is everything your father failed to be. I called my business Glass and Wire. It didn't mean much at first, just sounded cool to me. But later, I realized it was the perfect name. Glass, because life felt fragile. Wire, because I always felt like I was walking a tightrope. My first real customer was a guy from Craigslist who needed his cracked iPhone screen replaced. I charged him $40. It took me 3 hours, and I was shaking the whole time. But when I handed it back and it worked, he said, "Damn, kid, you got skills." Word spread, slowly, quietly, but it spread. I'd work after school in the garage behind our house. My mom thought I was just tinkering. I didn't correct her. The less my father knew, the better. He was around less by then, drinking more, yelling less, but not because he was kinder, because he was slipping. His fists still worked, but his rage had softened into a hollow kind of silence, like even the monster inside him was tired. I once walked past his room and saw him staring at the wall. No TV, no light, just him, breathing like the world had drained him. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt nothing. Mom asked if I wanted to go to prom that year. I told her no. I was saving for something bigger. At 17, I got my first wholesale order. A small tech shop wanted 20 refurbished phones. I pulled an all-nighter fixing them, soldering tiny wires under a desk lamp. My hands were sore for days. When I delivered the box, the owner handed me an envelope. Inside, $1,200 in cash. I stared at it like it was made of fire. I walked home and added it to the shoebox. That night, I dreamed of my own store. Clean walls, glass counters, a place where nobody had to flinch when the front door opened. I didn't just want money, I wanted safety. For me, for Mom, and for whatever came next, even if I had to build it from scraps, just like I had to rebuild her faith in people. My mother had no idea how much I'd saved. She thought I had a few bucks from odd jobs, but I was sitting on over $6,000. Every cent carefully stacked, tracked, and logged in a notebook I kept taped under my bed frame. I had charts, goals, even deadlines. My father still thought I was a dumb, soft kid, a dreamer. But I had sharper focus than he ever did. And a reason to stay sober, my mother's safety. At school, I kept my head down and grades up. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was building credit for scholarships, escape hatches. Some teachers thought I was brilliant. Others thought I was trouble waiting to happen. Nobody ever asked me why I was always tired. During senior year, we had college fairs. Recruiters smiled and handed out pens. I smiled back, but my mind was already past that. I didn't want a dorm room. I wanted a storefront. One night, I found a small, empty building for rent near an auto shop. Cracked windows, water stains, but affordable. $400 a month. I walked past it every day after school. I started negotiating with the landlord, an old man named Leo. I told him I was 18. I wasn't. I lied. But I showed him my repair work, my charts, my saved cash. He looked at me long and hard and said, "You're hungry. That matters more than age." He agreed to a 6-month lease, no credit check, just a handshake and cash up front. I signed my first lease on a Tuesday afternoon. Mom thought I was at the library. I bought paint, a second-hand counter, and cleaned the floor myself. I even fixed the busted lights. The place didn't shine, but it had energy. It had hope. I stood in the doorway that first night, looking out at the street, heart pounding. This wasn't just a shop. This was proof. Proof that I could take what he broke and build something beautiful. And that scared me more than any bruise ever had. Because now, I couldn't fail. Not for me, not for her, not ever. The day I opened the shop, it rained. Not a thunderstorm, just that slow, soaking California drizzle that makes everything feel heavier. But I showed up early, propped the door open with a milk crate, and waited. No one came, not for the first hour or the second. I sat behind my counter, wiping non-existent dust from the glass, pretending like I wasn't crushed. Around noon, a man in overalls walked in with a busted GPS unit. "Can you fix this?" he asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure. He left it with me. I worked on it for hours, my hands trembling the whole time. But it powered on, a little green arrow blinking like hope. When he returned, I handed it back, half expecting him to laugh. Instead, he said, "How much?" $30? I whispered. He gave me 50. "Keep the change." That night, I bought my mom flowers. Nothing fancy. Gas station carnations. But she cried when I gave them to her. "I'm proud of you," she said. And I believed her. Every day after that, I showed up. Rain or shine. Broken screens, batteries, keyboards. Word of mouth started to trickle in. A woman told her cousin. A teacher told a student. A mechanic sent over a whole box of radios. The garage smelled like solder and determination. My father didn't say much, just grunted when he saw the new business cards on the kitchen table. "Must be nice," he muttered once. But his words didn't carry weight anymore. One night, I found him drunk in the backyard, muttering to the dark. "You think you're better than me," he slurred. I didn't answer, because I didn't need to be better than him. I just needed to be nothing like him. And I wasn't. Not anymore. Not ever again. That shop wasn't just a business. It was my rebellion carved in neon. And every tick of the open sign. A heartbeat louder than his silence. By the time I turned 18, the shop was earning more than my father ever had. Not that he noticed. By then, he spent most of his days watching old westerns, drinking beer, and cursing at commercials. We passed each other like ghosts. No more yelling, no more fists. Just a cold war of silence and avoidance. But I was busy. I'd hired my first part-time helper, a kid from school who was good with numbers. I taught him repairs, and he helped me manage invoices and track inventory. We worked after hours, sometimes past midnight, eating gas station burritos and dreaming big. I started attending local business meetups. I didn't say much at first, just listened, took notes. I was usually the youngest guy in the room, but I was always the hungriest. Mom still worked the diner, but I begged her to quit. She finally agreed, only after I showed her my bank statements. "I don't need this much," she said, tears in her eyes. "You do," I told her. "You deserve rest." She started helping out at the shop, cleaning, organizing, greeting customers. She wore her name on a lanyard like it was a crown. For the first time in years, her shoulders relaxed. We moved out that fall. A 2-bedroom apartment above the shop, bright kitchen, clean floors, no shouting in the hallway, no broken doors, just quiet. I didn't tell my father we were leaving. We just left. When we drove away, Mom looked back once, then faced forward. Neither of us said a word. I haven't spoken to him since, and I never looked back. Because some chapters don't deserve a reread. They just need a clean ending. And our story, the real one, was finally beginning, free from fists, fear, or false apologies. The new apartment was small, but it felt like a palace. Mom and I shared a quiet rhythm. She'd make breakfast before I opened the shop, and I'd bring her lunch when she sorted receipts upstairs. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were living. I added a small neon sign to the front window: glass and wire, repairs with care. Corny, maybe, but it made people smile, and people kept coming. Customers brought more than broken phones. They brought stories, grief, laughter. One woman cried when I recovered the last voicemail from her late husband. Another brought in a radio that hadn't worked since her son left for Iraq. It wasn't just tech, it was trust. One afternoon, I got a letter. "Congratulations," it read. I'd been nominated for a local entrepreneur award. At first, I thought it was a scam. But it was real. Mom ironed my shirt that night, humming softly. She kissed my cheek before I left and whispered, "Make them see you." I stood in a room full of people with shiny watches and practiced smiles. And when they called my name, I couldn't move, but I did. I walked to the stage and told a story, not about sales or strategy, but about a boy who used to sleep in fear and now slept above his own business. People clapped, some cried. One man offered to invest. That night, back at the shop, I placed the award next to a photo of Mom and me on opening day. She smiled at it every time she passed, and I realized I hadn't just built a business. I'd built a world where my mother could breathe, a life where kindness echoed louder than cruelty. And it was only the beginning, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running from something. I was running toward something. Success has a strange way of calling ghosts back to your door. One evening, I came downstairs to find my mother standing in the middle of the shop, white as a sheet. In her hand was a letter, no stamp, no return address. It was from him, not a full letter, just a note scrawled in messy handwriting. "Heard you made something of yourself. Guess you're not so soft after all." I laughed, not out of joy, out of disbelief. After years of silence, that was it. No apology, no regret. Just a flicker of recognition from the man who used to throw beer bottles when I got a math problem wrong. I tossed the letter in the trash. Mom didn't say a word, but I saw the tremble in her hands for the rest of the night. A week later, he showed up in person. He looked smaller, not just older, shrunk, like life had worn him down to the bitter core. I was outside locking up when I saw him across the street, staring at the sign. He walked over. "Nice place," he said, like we were neighbors catching up. I didn't answer. "You did good," he added. "Must be nice." That phrase again. I looked him in the eyes and said, "You don't get to comment on my life." He nodded like he expected that. Then he asked the one question I never thought I'd hear. "Can I come inside?" I paused. Not because I was scared, but because I was thinking of my mother upstairs, of everything she had survived, of every bruise I pretended to sleep through. "No," I said. "You can't." He stood there for a moment, then walked away. No fight, no slur, just footsteps fading into the dark. I locked the door and went inside. Upstairs, Mom was folding laundry. "He came," I said. "I know," she replied. We didn't need to say anything else. Some closure doesn't come with shouting. It comes with silence. And sometimes, silence is the loudest thing we ever say. After that night, things settled again. The business kept growing. I hired 2 more employees. One for front desk, one for diagnostics. I was only 19, but people started calling me Sir. I still flinched every time. I tried not to let the past creep in, but sometimes it did. Certain sounds, a door slamming, a man raising his voice in the parking lot, would send my chest tight. My body remembered things my mind tried to forget. But I found ways to fight back. I started running, not away from something, toward strength. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd hit the trail behind the shop, music in my ears, miles under my feet, breathing, sweating, surviving. Mom joined a book club. She started baking again. We laughed more, talked more. She'd leave little notes in the shop like, lunch in fridge, love you. It was peace. Then, one day, a woman came into the shop with a phone that wouldn't turn on. Middle-aged, kind eyes. She smiled at me and said, "Your mother told me you could fix anything." I smiled back. She left her number. For the repair, of course. But I found myself texting her days later, asking if she wanted coffee. Her name was Maya. We met up at a small diner, the kind with cracked booths and free refills. She asked about the shop. I asked about her favorite books. We stayed until closing. It felt easy, like warmth I didn't know I'd been missing. Weeks passed, then months. She met my mom. They talked like old friends. One night, after dinner, Maya looked at me and said, "You're building something more than just a business." I looked around our quiet apartment, the photo wall, the laughter in the kitchen, the music playing low from Mom's radio, and I realized she was right. I was building a life, one piece at a time, one smile, one hug, one memory. And for the first time ever, I wasn't scared of what came next. Because now I had something worth protecting and someone worth dreaming with. Maya became a regular part of our world. She'd drop by the shop with coffee, bring over dinner when Mom had a long day. Sometimes she'd sit behind the counter, reading while I worked, humming quietly to whatever played on the radio. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was soft and steady, the kind of presence that made everything else feel calmer. On weekends, we'd take short road trips, nothing extravagant, just small coastal towns, roadside diners, used bookstores. I watched Mom laugh more in those months than in the last 10 years combined. I didn't say, "I love you" at first. The words felt too big, too risky. But one night, as we sat by the ocean, watching the tide roll in, Maya leaned against me and said, "I feel safe with you." And somehow, that was louder than love. I squeezed her hand. Me too. We started talking about the future, quietly, cautiously. A second location for the shop, a place with more foot traffic, maybe even hiring a manager so I could breathe a little. Mom encouraged it all. She kept a little notebook labeled Big Dreams. Every time we mentioned a plan, she'd write it down like it was already real. Then, just as things felt perfectly balanced, life reminded me it had sharp edges. I got a call from the landlord of our old house. "Your father passed." I stood still, not because I was in shock, but because I felt nothing. No grief, no anger, no release. Just a blankness I couldn't explain. "He didn't leave a will," the landlord continued. "Place is in your name. He put it there last year." I hung up. For hours, I sat in the shop, lights off, heart frozen. Why me? Why now? Maya found me there. She didn't ask anything. She just sat beside me. Eventually I whispered, "He left me the house." She didn't respond. She just took my hand. And once again, silence said everything. But this time, I knew. Whatever came next, I wouldn't face it alone. We visited the house on a cloudy Thursday. It looked smaller than I remembered. The paint had chipped, the yard was overgrown, and a cracked plastic chair still sat on the porch like it had been waiting for him to return. But he never would. Mom didn't want to go in. She waited in the car while I turned the key. The door creaked open, and every step inside felt like walking through a memory I didn't ask for. The stains on the carpet, the dent in the wall from when he'd thrown the remote, the ceiling fan that still wobbled when I flipped the switch. Everything was exactly where we left it, and yet it all felt foreign. I walked into my old room. Same scuffed desk, same broken drawer, but now dust coated every surface like time itself had been trying to bury the past. Then I saw it, a small box on the bed. Inside were photos, some I'd never seen before. Me as a baby, Mom smiling in the sunlight, even one of us at the beach before things got bad. Underneath the photos was a folded piece of paper, a note. "I wasn't good, but I wasn't blind. You were always better than me. I knew it the day you stopped flinching." I didn't cry. I didn't forgive him either. I just stood there, holding the weight of a man who never figured out how to love. When I walked out, Mom didn't ask what I found. She just looked at me and nodded, like she already knew. We didn't keep the house. I donated the furniture, called a realtor, sold it within a month. Every dollar went into a new branch of glass and wire. This time, in a city that had never heard his name. A fresh start, one where I wasn't running from ghosts, but planting roots. And this time, I was building something that couldn't be inherited or destroyed. It was mine. It was earned. And it was finally enough. The second shop opened on a rainy Tuesday. I stood outside with Maya, both of us clutching umbrellas and laughing as the ribbon fluttered in the wind. It wasn't a grand opening. No balloons, no speeches, just a key, a lock, and the quiet sound of a new chapter unfolding. I hired 2 young techs from the community college nearby. I trained them myself, the same way I'd once taught myself. Slow, patient, focused. They reminded me of who I used to be. Nervous, hopeful, eager to prove something. Business picked up fast. Locals came in curious and left as regulars. Word spread. That guy from Glass and Wire really knows his stuff. But it wasn't just the repairs. It was the way we treated people, the way we remembered names, the way we made them feel seen. And I kept building. Mom stayed at the first shop. It was her kingdom now. She'd greet customers with her signature warmth and always made sure there was fresh coffee by the counter. Sometimes she'd send me voice memos like, "Don't forget to eat," or "You need new pens." Maya and I talked more seriously about moving in together. Her lease was up soon, and my apartment suddenly felt too quiet when she wasn't there. One evening, she came over with a duffel bag and said, "I brought half my books and all my tea. Hope that's enough." It was. That night, we sat on the floor, surrounded by books and takeout containers, watching bad TV and laughing like kids. I looked at her and realized this mess, this warmth, this simple joy was everything I'd once believed I'd never have. Not long after, I got an email from the City Business Bureau. They wanted to feature my story in a campaign about young entrepreneurs who rose from hardship. I hesitated. Then I said yes, because my story wasn't about pain. It was about what came after and the things we choose to build when no one ever built for us. The campaign went viral. It started local, just a few shares, some comments. But within days, news outlets picked it up. From broken home to business owner. Teen builds tech empire from scratch. The headlines made it sound flashier than it was. But people loved the story. Customers doubled, then tripled. I had to hire more help. I opened a 3rd location by the end of the year. Maya helped design the layout. Mom picked the paint color. We made it feel like home, not just a store. That winter, I got an invitation to speak at a national business conference. Me, a boy who once hid in closets to escape fists and yelling, now asked to speak about resilience. Maya came with me. We stayed in a fancy hotel with too many pillows and room service menus we laughed at. The night before the speech, I sat in front of the mirror and tried to practice. But all I could see was the kid I used to be. Thin, scared, quiet. The one who counted bruises like bedtime stories. The next morning, I stood backstage, heart pounding. The host called my name. I stepped out. The lights were blinding. The room looked endless, but I breathed. I began. I spoke without notes. I spoke from the scars, not the script. I told them about my mom, about the nights we packed in silence, about the bruises that weren't always visible, about starting over with nothing but a few tools and a locked jaw of determination. I told them how love builds slowly, how survival can become strength, how forgiveness isn't always the goal. Sometimes it's just peace, just quiet, just safety. When I finished, the room stood. Maya cried. Mom sent me a video from the shop, clapping at the screen with the other employees. And for the first time, I believed the story too. I wasn't the boy hiding in the shadows anymore. I was the man holding the light. And finally, I knew I wasn't a product of violence. I was the result of everything that came after it. After the conference, everything accelerated. We received messages from people across the country, survivors, single parents, former foster kids, teens trying to start over. They didn't want advice, they wanted connection, to be seen. That's when Maya had the idea. What if we start a foundation, she said. Something small, scholarships, maybe, free mentorship. We called it the Wire Project, named after our store, but also the idea of rebuilding connections, restoring broken circuits, giving power back. We launched quietly. No flashy gala, no celebrities, just a website, a mission, and 3 people who had once needed what we were now offering. Our first scholarship went to a 17-year-old girl named Tasha. Her essay began, "I want to build something that outlives my pain." I cried reading it. So did Mom. We flew her out. She shadowed us for a week. I taught her how to repair water-damaged phones and cracked screens. Maya helped her prep for college. Mom gave her a pie recipe. We sent her home with a laptop, a journal, and more hugs than she probably expected. That night, Mom looked at me and said, "You've turned our survival into someone else's chance." I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed and grateful. Later that year, we hosted our first community event, Tech Repair Day, free fixes for anyone who walked through the door. People lined up around the block. An old man brought in a broken radio. "Hasn't worked since my wife passed," he said. We fixed it. He cried. We cried. Then he told us a story about how they used to dance in their kitchen to that exact song. And for a moment, we all stood there, surrounded by static and memory, feeling like time had folded in on itself. In that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just a business. It was healing, not just for others, but for us. For the boy who never got a birthday party. For the woman who once flinched at door hinges. For the family that rebuilt itself, one cracked screen at a time. Love, when repurposed, is the strongest thing we can give. And I had so much more left to give. Life kept blooming in quiet, beautiful ways. Maya and I moved into a little house just outside the city. It had a garden, creaky floors, and a kitchen that smelled like coffee and cinnamon most mornings. Mom lived 10 minutes away. We saw her every Sunday for dinner, her lasagna, our stories, laughter echoing off the walls. I bought a dog, a mutt named Pinto, who barked at squirrels and slept with one paw on my foot like he was guarding something precious. We weren't rich, not yet, but we were wealthy in every way that counted. Then came the letter, a man claiming to be my uncle, my father's brother. He'd seen the interviews, read the stories, said he wanted to talk. I ignored it, but he kept writing. Finally, Maya said, "Closure doesn't always come in silence. Maybe there's more to know." So I met him. He was older, gray-bearded, soft-spoken. We met at a park. He brought a photo album. "I wasn't close to your dad," he said, "but I knew the man before the violence, before the drinking." I listened, skeptically at first. He told me stories about how my dad used to fix radios, how he sang in a garage band, how he once built a toy race car track that ran through the entire house just to make me laugh. I didn't remember any of that, but one picture caught me. Mom holding me as a baby, my dad in the background, smiling, really smiling. His eyes looked softer, younger, almost kind. "I'm not here to change your story," he said. "I just wanted you to know there was more to it. Not better, just more." When I got home, I showed the album to Mom. She stared at the picture for a long time. "That was the day we brought you home," she whispered. For a while, he really did try. We didn't cry. We didn't rewrite anything. But something softened. And maybe that was enough. Because sometimes, healing isn't about rewriting the past. Sometimes, it's just about making peace with all its shades. The Wire Project kept growing. We partnered with local schools, offering after-school workshops on basic tech repair. Kids who'd never held a screwdriver learned how to fix laptops, solder circuit boards, and rebuild shattered phones. Some of them stayed, interned, then got hired. We weren't just repairing devices, we were training futures. One afternoon, a teenage boy named Marcus stopped me after class. "You think people can really change?" he asked. I said yes. Then I told him why. I told him about my father and about me. Marcus nodded slowly. Then maybe I still got time. I'll never forget that. Change didn't erase the past, but it gave it context, a place to belong. The shop had become more than a business. It was a community center, a sanctuary. People came to repair more than just tech. They came to fix memories, relationships, and sometimes themselves. Mom retired a year later. She wanted to travel. She and her best friend planned a road trip across the Southwest. They sent postcards from every state, always with the same closing line: "We're free." Maya and we finally got married. A small ceremony in the backyard. Mom cried. I cried. Pinto barked through the vows. We danced under string lights and ate too much cake. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. On our honeymoon, we visited a quiet town in Oregon. Maya pointed to a small storefront. "Fourth location," she said, smiling. Maybe, but I wasn't chasing more anymore. I was chasing better, deeper, truer, the kind of life where I could look in the mirror and not see the boy who survived, but the man who built. I used to think success was money, recognition, proving something. Now I knew it was this: a kitchen full of laughter, a phone that rings with good news, a stranger calling me boss with a smile, peace, not because the past vanished, but because we finally knew how to live alongside it. And that's what healing truly looked like, building anyway. It happened on a Thursday. I was at the original shop when the call came. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something in me whispered, "Pick up." The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "This is Dr. Nguyen from St. Luke's Hospital. Your father is here. He listed you as his emergency contact." I didn't speak. My fingers froze around the phone. My breath caught in my throat. "Sir," the voice asked again, gently. I heard Maya in my head. "You don't owe him anything, but you might owe yourself something." So I went. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and old magazines. I walked through the corridors with a knot in my stomach, unsure whether I wanted to run or stay. Part of me feared seeing a ghost. Another part feared becoming one. They led me to a small room. He was thinner than I remembered, gray. His eyes, once burning with rage, now looked like wet ash, dimmed. He looked at me. "You came," he said, almost like a question. I said nothing. He talked anyway, about being alone, about his regrets, about how, in his words, life got away from me. He told me he saw me on TV, that he was proud, that he told the nurses, "That's my boy." It didn't hit me like thunder. It was quieter than that, like a faucet dripping in an empty house. I didn't forgive him, but I stayed. I sat beside the bed and listened. For once, he didn't shout. He didn't blame. He just remembered, quietly, brokenly. He said he didn't expect anything, that just seeing me was enough. When I left, I didn't feel lighter, but I felt something hard to name: grief. Not just for what he was, but for what he never became. I didn't go back, but I didn't block the number either. Sometimes healing isn't dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet decision. To listen without hate, to remember without fear. Sometimes it's choosing to walk out of a hospital and not carry the pain with you. And sometimes it's realizing that the parts of you that came from him, you've already reshaped into something beautiful. Years later, I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for our 10th location. There were balloons this time, a brass band, local reporters. Maya stood beside me, holding my hand. Mom was in the front row, dressed in a bold red coat, grinning like she'd just won a game show. Pinto had a bow tie. He barked at the sound of scissors slicing the ribbon. The mayor handed me a plaque. "For your service to the community," he said. Cameras flashed, but all I could think about was that first shop, tiny, dark, held together with duct tape and hope. After the crowd cleared, I wandered into the back room of the new shop. It smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. I sat on a stool and looked at the tools on the wall, neatly arranged. Order, stability, legacy. Then I pulled out an old box. Inside were things I'd kept through the years. My first toolkit, a cracked photo of me and Mom outside the first shop, a faded newspaper clipping about our scholarship program, a letter from Tasha, our first recipient. "You saved me," it read in ink that had started to blur at the edges. I didn't cry, but I felt it, all of it, the weight, the growth, the impossible truth of how far we'd come. Mom joined me in the room. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Your father didn't break you," she said quietly. "He gave you the pieces, and you built something better." I looked up at her. "No," I replied. "We built it." That night, we had dinner at our house. The table was long and crowded. Maya's family, my mom's new travel friends, employees who felt like siblings. Laughter bounced off the walls. Pinto begged for scraps, tail wagging. Marcus, now a full-time lead tech, stood to give a toast. "To the man who taught me how to fix things, machines, futures, himself." I didn't expect tears, but they came. And I let them fall. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't success. It's softness, peace, a dinner table filled with people who stayed, and a life I never thought I'd get to call mine. Years from now, if someone asks me how I did it, how I went from a house filled with shouting to a life filled with warmth, I won't know how to answer in one sentence, but I'll try. I'll say, I kept going. I kept breathing when it hurt. I kept moving when it was easier to hide. I kept loving even when it scared me. And I kept showing up, again and again, for myself, for others, for the life I hadn't yet imagined. Because healing isn't linear. It's messy and slow and full of setbacks, but it's also filled with quiet victories. Like the first night I slept without fear, or the first time I laughed and didn't feel guilty. Like walking into a room and not looking for exits. Like saying, "I love you," and believing it could last. I think about the boy I used to be, the one who flinched at footsteps, who spoke in whispers, who thought broken was permanent. If he could see me now, he'd see a man who still carries scars, but wears them like armor. He'd see a mother who survived and then thrived. He'd see a wife who turned light into love every single day. He'd see a dog who barks too much, a business that gives more than it takes, and a future that once seemed impossible. He'd see a home, not the kind with four walls, but the kind you build with people who choose you, day after day. I used to think my father's voice would echo in every room I walked into, but now it's my voice that fills the space, my story, my truth, my turn. And maybe one day, someone who's hurting will hear it and think, if he made it, maybe I can too. That's why I tell it, not for revenge, not for recognition, but because someone once stayed silent, and I paid the price. So I speak, loud, clear, unashamed, because the past might shape us, but it never has to define us. And because I'm no longer surviving, I'm living, fully, freely, finally.